Well, good morning and welcome. My name is Alex Marr, and I'm the Associate Curator for Native American Art here at the St. Louis Art Museum. And I have the privilege of introducing our speaker this morning. But first, as is customary to begin programs about Native art, I want to acknowledge that the St. Louis region is the ancestral territory for a lineage of Indigenous people, including members of the Mississippian civilization that built mounds in Cahokia and St. Louis early in the last millennium. And in the 18th and 19th centuries, colonial settlement disrupted subsequent indigenous relations with this place. So the Osage Nation and members of the Illini Confederacy, including the Peoria tribe of Oklahoma, know the St. Louis region as part of their homelands. And finally, I want to recognize the diversity of Native peoples who live and work in St. Louis today, friends, neighbors, and colleagues. In 2010, the Donald Danforth Jr. Collection, Carolyn Danforth, and the Danforth Foundation dramatically transformed the presence of Native American art at the St. Louis Art Museum. Through multiple gifts, including the donation of 250 works of art, the Danforth family ensured that Native women's art of the Plains contributes to the stories of artistic achievement that the museum shares with the people of St. Louis and the world. I encourage you to visit the Danforth Gallery on the museum's third floor and see for yourself these remarkable works of art. Please join me in thanking the Danforth family for their support of the museum and its programming. One continuing legacy of the Danforth gift is the inspiration it provides to others. So the museum has welcomed a number of recent gifts of outstanding Native art, most recently the Healy Collection of Native Modernism. And I'm happy to share that the museum has just published a catalog of this collection, which you can find in the bookshop, along with the catalog of the Danforth collection. So if you don't have these two publications on the collection here, check those out as well. Today, we gather for the 14th annual Donald Danforth Jr. Lecture on Native American Art, and I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Annika Johnson. Dr. Johnson is the Stacy and Bruce Simon Curator of Native American Art at the Joslyn Museum. In Omaha, Annika has developed a number of projects focused on art of the Upper Missouri River and the Plains. Her exhibitions and installations include The Indian Congress by Wendy Redstar in 2010, Faces from the Interior, the North American Portraits of Carl Bodmer in 2022, reinstallation of collection galleries for the museum's 2024 expansion, and the current exhibition, Henry Pear, Appliqué sur le Terrain. On November 15th, the Joslyn will open Dr. Johnson's next exhibition, which presents new work by the artist Chanupa Hanska Luger. Previously, Annika held fellowships at the Center for Advanced Study in the Visual Arts and the Smithsonian American Art Museum, each in Washington, D.C. She earned her PhD in art history from the University of Pittsburgh, where her dissertation considered a diverse set of primarily 19th century artworks as they relate to the historical agency of Dakota people in present-day Minnesota. Her writing has appeared in American Indian Culture and Research Journal, First American Art Magazine, Res, Anthropology and Aesthetics, and Archives of American Art Journal, as well as numerous catalogs. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Annika Johnson to the SLAM stage.
Well, hello, everyone. It is truly an honor to be here. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning looking and learning about Native American art. I had the chance to meet the Danforth family this morning. What a wonderful group of people and supporters of the arts. You all have made a really wonderful gift to the city. I was sharing with them that I saw the first installation of the Danforth collection when I was in graduate school at the University of Pittsburgh, and I did this cross-country tour. I drove here from Pittsburgh, and that was the one thing I saw in St. Louis. Saw the installation and then kept moving on, and it was fantastic. So I think with that, I will get started. When I began as the inaugural curator of Native American art at the Joslin Art Museum in 2019, I couldn't have foreseen how rewarding and challenging that a 2-year closure, new pavilion, and the chance to reinstall the collection across 3 buildings could be. It's a year out, and I'm still kind of exhausted from it and learning quite a few lessons. So this talk, I was so excited when Alex called me and invited me to speak with you all today, because it's given me a chance to reflect on the past year, visitor responses to the reinstallation, and also community responses. We work with a lot of Native-run organizations. So I'll share a bit about this process and then also about what's coming up at the museum. So the reinstallation of Native American art at the Joslin weaves together Indigenous and Euro-American creative traditions throughout all 6 of our American art galleries. And the American installation concludes in around 1940, but the story of Native art continues in our 20th century galleries and our 21st century art galleries that are in the new Hawks Pavilion. So you're seeing the contemporary art installation in the new pavilion on the screen. Our approach, nothing is brand new here. I think a lot of what we did is new to Omaha. It's an approach that builds on decades of scholarship, the work of museums and cultural centers and colleagues that have reshaped art history and curatorial practice. Situated on the Missouri River in present-day Omaha, Nebraska, the Joslin is very much an institution of the prairie. Those who dismiss the region as flyover country simply aren't looking close enough. In a single square yard of tallgrass prairie, you might find more than 40 plant species. Seasonal blossoms of purple coneflowers, goldenrods, and asters pattern the land, a living composition that rewards a patient looking, and that has shaped the experiences and aesthetics of those who have lived here. Nebraska itself comes from the word Nebraska, or flat waters, which describes the unique quality of the Platte River, which flows into the Missouri close to the city. Within this context, when I think about place and how institutions relate to place, it reminds me that museums aren't abstract entities, they belong to a particular place. The history of Native art moves in cycles that reflect enduring relationships. The American galleries, however, occupy the Joslin's 1931 memorial building, and those galleries are laid out in a linear fashion. Like a textbook, this is a Western art historical tradition. So when we were thinking about how to reinstall the collection, we worked with a Native Art Advisory Committee, and their guidance shaped the entire reinstallation project. And they urged us to use this to our advantage, the challenge of the physical space, and use chronology as a tool that would ground visitors in familiar paintings while expanding the narrative beyond them. Their insight shaped how we drew thematic connections that unfold across the collections and how we're balancing clarity and complexity while also fostering a space for Native-led teaching and dialogue. It felt natural then to begin the American galleries with an emphasis on the river, whose currents have facilitated the movement of ideas and materials that have defined this region for millennia. And importantly for our conversation today, they brought glass beads that became so central to artistic expression in the reservation era. The Swiss artist Karl Bodmer passed through present-day Omaha in 1833 while traveling upriver with the German naturalist Prince Maximilian of Vie. They had just come from St. Louis, where William Clark advised the Europeans to stock up on beads, tobacco, silk ribbons, and other goods to give to Indigenous leaders that they would meet as they traveled up the river and that they would rely on to complete their journey. The journals, watercolors, and drawings that they produced during this journey into present-day Montana and back form the cornerstone of the Joslin's collection. So you're just seeing a selection here, renowned for their detail. So both the watercolors of Carl Bodmer and the journals of Prince Maximilian, they've become key references. Most recently, we've worked on a number of projects with Native artists where they're investigating the collection depictions of ancestors and ancestral lands. Bodmer traveled to the U.S. just 3 years after Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act in 1830. This was a policy that set into motion the forced displacement of Native nations and ultimately led to the reservation system. On a brief detour to Louisiana, Bodmer painted portraits of Choctaw and Cherokee individuals who were already living as refugees of removal. Yet his watercolors are often viewed through the lens of the before times or the life untouched, when in reality, these portraits reveal communities with decades of experience trading with Europeans and adapting to colonial incursion. So you can see this in the astonishing quantity of white pony beads and blue pony beads. I call these Bodmer blues. That really struck Bodmer. He took care to paint in fine detail the strings of dentalium and bead earrings in the upper corner of this Cree woman's portrait on the right. And the abundance of costly blue beads in his portrayals remind us that materials moving along the river became vessels of meaning. Beads carried stories of exchange and identity, linking global commerce to personal expression, and set the stage for reservation-era beadwork that will bring into focus. For Umaha or Omaha people, beads entered the region through the Bellevue Agency, which was a U.S. government post and a key center of trade just 10 miles from where the Joslin is located today. Bodmer's painting of the agency reminds us of something vital. Umaha women, and by extension, Umaha aesthetics, were central to the river economy. This is one of the few images where we see Indigenous women in daily life within Bodmer's watercolors. And you can see them sitting outside of the agency, visiting with each other, have their children. And I think it underscores how women and creative practices not only helped shape the river economy, but also furthered creative expression. They traded hides for the tools and materials to make regalia, cotton cloth, wool shroud, sewing needles, silk ribbons, and importantly for our conversation today, hinska or glass beads. Umaha artists didn't simply adopt these new materials. They wove them into existing aesthetic and linguistic frameworks, carrying forward enduring systems of meaning. The word hinska exemplifies this. It literally translates to white teeth or teeth white, referring to the pre-colonial practice of sewing elk teeth onto regalia to symbolize honor and status. There's a great example of an elk tooth dress in the Danforth collection. The term was also used for shell beads, such as dentalium, traded from coastal peoples long before glass beads arrived from Europe. And so this is a term that's had a long use, and it perfectly describes the Venetian bone white beads. You're seeing an example on the right. The pound beads entered the region during this time. They're off-white, slightly irregular in size, and they have this milky opacity. The continuity between material and meaning is embodied in an extraordinary beaded jacket in the Joslin's collection. Thousands of small, densely applied white seed beads form large motifs of crescent moons tipped upside down, spilling 3 falling stars. The pattern repeats 6 times, so twice on the front, twice on the back, and once on each sleeve, creating this really elegant composition that's balanced across 4 sides of the human body. The 5-pointed star was relatively new in Native art in the mid-century, and it echoed U.S. military insignia and, of course, the American flag. which continued to accrue stars as states joined the Union. This rise paralleled displacement and dispossession, and the star would have been instantly recognizable to anyone living near a fort or a trading post. There's excellent scholarship on the complexities of U.S. national symbolism in Native regalia. Joe Horsecapture wrote an essay for the Danforth catalog. There's an incredible jacket on view right now, which you should all go see after the talk. That's a later example of this style of jacket, and it has American flags on it. So we see this in later examples of pictorial beadwork. This is a vest from the Joslin's collection. You'll see images of Christian crosses or American flags that signified camps close to Indian agencies. Such imagery also offered a way to embed indigenous practices that were banned at the time within the guise of sanctioned national symbols. Yet, the 5 pointed stars on the jacket fall from a crescent moon, an image that connects them to a much older Plains tradition of the 4 pointed star, a cosmological symbol that appears in a pair of Omaha man's chief's leggings, also in our collection. So this beautiful detail shows that the leggings feature wide loom beaded strips patterned with alternating red 4 pointed stars and black lines set against a white background. And this is said to represent the Milky Way. It's the path that the soul follows to the spirit world. The 5 pointed stars on the jacket may carry a related meaning, so absorbing this language of empire into an indigenous framework of balance and renewal. The jacket resists easy categorization, which is why I love to have conversations about it in the galleries, especially knowledge bearers, beadworkers, educators, dancers, and everyone has a slightly different reading. Some find the moon imagery to be quite puzzling. Within an Omaha context, the moon is female, expressed in women's names and in their doings. Customarily, men weren't supposed to look at the moon, let alone wear moon imagery. So the question that many have asked is, does this mean that it's not Omaha? Could it have been made for a two-spirit person? Some see it as a celestial vision, so something that's incredibly unique to the maker or the wearer and ultimately unknowable to us today. What we do know through close looking is that the jacket's artistry and experimentation suggest it was made for a person of prominence, someone who is deeply connected to networks of trade along the Missouri River and positioned between cultural worlds. While preparing the jacket for installation, we had the chance to look at its interior construction with a fashion historian. And she noted the tailoring, which she said was incredible, and it was very French. It was somebody who had experience with French tailoring. On the back, there's this sloping shoulder line. It has a very narrow silhouette and bone buttons. So it's typically the style of a wool jacket, but it's sewn from hide, which shows us how the maker worked fluently between native design and European fashion. Shoulder fringe adorned with less expensive basket beads, they're inpainted with red instead of pigmented, was added later to the jacket. So this fringe was added at a later time. And it's the kind of embellishment that became popular with Buffalo Bill style Western jackets in the late 19th century. And so some people see this and will date this later in the 19th century, but it is from the mid 19th century. We have a really great curatorial assistant at the Joslin right now, Cotty de la Cruz, and she has a really sharp eye for finding examples of repurposed beadwork in the collection or for spotting these kinds of additions. And once you start to see it, you can't unsee it. When we were just upstairs looking at the Danforth collection, and there's this great plateau bag that's been repaired several times, and how the person repaired it was with beadwork. So there's multicolored beadwork kind of tracing the lines. So I love to see those examples of repair and how regalia making is something that's continuous and ongoing. So this brings us to the jacket's provenance. which is murky. It's said to have belonged to a man named Logan Fontenelle, who was the son of an Umaha mother, and she was the daughter of Chief Onkatanga, or Big Elk. His father was a French-American fur trader. Umaha people had a unique relationship with the French. Their word for French people translates to something like those who are white men but don't act like strangers, which I just think it says a lot about kinship and how they had a presence in the community. Whether or not Fontenelle was the person who owned this jacket, I think it still embodies this milieu of shifting identity along the Missouri River. Native and Euro-American artists were working simultaneously at this time, and their artworks reflect overlapping geographies, intertwined economies, and communities. So to highlight this artistic contemporaneity, we paired the jacket with George Caleb Bingham's painting titled Watching a Cargo by Night, painted in 1854. Y'all have several Binghams here. You're so lucky. We have one Bingham. It's a good one. It's beautiful, but I was so overjoyed to see the Binghams at Slam. Bingham was an artist who helped define the image of the American West in his paintings of the river and of life around it. One of his few nocturnes, this painting portrays traders resting on the riverbank beneath a rising moon, their figures illuminated by the glow of firelight. With soft chiaroscuro, Bingham conveys the drama of stillness. In 1854, so the same year that this was painted, Umaha people stood at the threshold of profound transformation. Logan Fontenelle accompanied an Omaha delegation to Washington, serving as an interpreter during negotiations that resulted in the cession of 4 million acres of Omaha land. Families left their Earth Lodge villages that were near Bellevue, near that agency, many traveling by foot to the newly established Omaha Reservation, 70 miles upriver. And a year later, Logan Fontenelle was killed during an attack on his hunting party. So the yellow on this map, that's showing where the new reservations were established in 1854. My hope is that seen together, this jacket and painting invite us to think in terms of simultaneity rather than contrast, which means to settle on history. Beadwork has long been seen as peripheral to painting. As a curator, I'm well aware that these are not equivalent objects. One is made to hang on the wall, the other is made to move with the body. And this physicality really shapes how visitors experience them. So aesthetic continuity is what really encourages us to hold them within the same space of thought. So this might sound really simple, but when we were in the galleries and planning this out, we ended up creating these key moments, these moments where we would have a Native and Euro-American work paired. And it's simple. Both works feature the night sky. I think this forms a quiet bridge between the two of the works, and it opens up conversation. So this conversation between the jacket and Bingham's painting sets the stage for understanding how multiple styles and worldviews coexisted within Umaha art of the same period. So this men's war shirt may appear to be more customary than the jacket or older than the jacket, but it was made around the same time, if not a couple decades later. This simultaneity of styles reminds us that the history of regalia making doesn't move in a single file line. It unfolds through many forms at once. And language again gives form to this idea. The Umaha word inoji, meaning to stand in, applies both to older style war shirts and to European tailored jackets. Earlier shirts were cut from whole hides, preserving the animal's form. The term later extended to tailored hide and cloth garments. On this shirt, you can see beaded strips that run along the shoulders and the arms. And they're worked in spot stitch applique, so it has this incredibly smooth, even surface, which really amplifies the graphic power of the bear paw motifs. These bear paws are balanced by interior colors of red and green. The design embodies harmony between opposites, day and night, earth and sky, life and death. Design elements of symmetry, color, and motif are all expressions of Umaha kinship that situate the wearer within a social and a cosmological order. The tribe is divided into earth and sky clans, which is an important framework to consider when you're bringing cultural belongings like the shirt and leggings together in the gallery. The shirt was once thought to form a set with the previously mentioned leggings, and at one point, this group was labeled the Omaha suit. However, the circular stamped hail symbols on the leggings link this wearer to an upper world clan. The bear paw design suggests an earth clan affiliation. So this differing imagery points to two different men. So for this reason, we decided not to display them together. I'm generally cautious about assigning such definitive interpretation to symbols, but this was an unusual case. The Omaha ethnologist Francis LaFleche wrote about this shirt and leggings in his 2-volume study of his own people, published in 1911. That he collected these belongings from within his own community adds another layer of complexity. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, while employed by the Smithsonian, Francis LaFleche worked under contract with ethnographic museums to gather and even commission the making of cultural belongings from his own community. Positioned at once as insider and ethnographer, he recognized that assimilation policies were eroding the language, the ceremony, and the knowledge systems needed to care for and to sustain these belongings. The Ethnological Museum in Berlin tasked LaFleche with assembling a collection that would embody the total life of the people, in their words. Regalia for men, women, and children, games. This is a plum pit game in the top center. Tools for daily use and ceremonial items. And his collecting took shape within a profound tension between preservation and separation, between care and removal. The collection includes distinctive Umaha soft-soled moccasins. So this is a style you won't see anywhere else. Umaha moccasins are cut from a single piece of hide and then sewn up the side. Two examples here on the right. There's usually a beaded strip down the vamp with 2 small circles, so one on either side. Someone shared with me recently a story about these eyes. So they have this kind of face-like appearance that moccasin vamps do. And they said when you're out on the prairie, minding your own business, and suddenly see 2 eyes peering up at you through the grasses, you know you're in trouble. I had a chance to view this collection with students and educators from the Nebraska Indian Community College. So this is on the Omaha Reservation. They were invited to curate an exhibition of the LaFleche collection in Berlin. They ended up calling it Against the Current, which is the translation of Umaha. They noted that several items, including moccasins within the collection, are clearly Lakota, which raised the question of why LaFleche included them when, especially in moccasin designs, Umaha mocks are so distinctive. And also you have these histories that frame Umaha and Lakota people as adversaries. So the group reminded us that, these belongings were made and worn by individuals, not by fixed cultural categories. So we have this impulse in the field towards attribution, but identity, like design, it is fluid. So regalia moved through trade, kinship, intermarriage, and sometimes it was the practical matter of what somebody had on hand. So when LaFleche was, going to the reservation and collecting from individuals, there could be a number of reasons why there's a pair of Lakota mocks that they would sell to him for Berlin. So cultural attribution, I'm starting to see it as a matter of relationships. It's relationships between the maker and the wearer, the community and the collector, and of past and present. So you have your wall labels, and really it could say this pair of moccasins is Lakota, it's Umaha, it travels through networks. We have an example in the collection that's associated with several examples, um, where the cultural belonging is associated with a reservation. We know it was collected from a certain reservation, and then that becomes this fixed attribution. So this is a pair of moccasins that are attributed Umaha. Um, Members in the community today will say, like, these are not Umaha mocks. Um, and so we've had conversations. What do we do on our wall labels? How do we identify this within the collection? And it's really turned towards this conversation of the much longer history of Umaha people. Their lands extended beyond what the reservation is today. But they'll say within their traditions, they consider themselves a Great Lakes people. So these moccasins aren't that classic Umaha design, but there still is that connection. It does raise the question within these conversations of what makes something Umaha, and I think this is a question that's continuously asked and continues to be asked today. When we look at how Umaha people represented themselves during this time, rigid notions of style quickly dissolve. We've already seen this with LaFlèche's two portraits, where he dressed according to the two worlds that he navigated. Um, Frank A. Reinhardt's 1898 portraits of Indigenous individuals and families are highly regarded within their communities. Families traveled to Reinhardt's studio, which was located in downtown Omaha, during the 1898 Indian Congress. So over 35 tribes gathered in present-day North Omaha as part of the Trans-Mississippi Exposition. And Reinhardt took these really incredible portraits. And he documented people's names, which wasn't always done in the 19th century. So we have these on display as part of an installation by an artist named Wendy Red Star. So she and I have looked through these portraits together. We've had people from the community come into the museum and look at the portraits. And, it's they're really well recognized, I think, by families for Reinhardt. He didn't costume people. They were wearing their own garments. This is a little bit different than the photographs of Edward Curtis and the photography practice of Curtis. This is life size on this screen. Um, Especially in the reservation era, belonging was expressed in multiple overlapping ways. So I think about our wall labels, these small yet powerful ontological tools that shape how artworks live and mean within the museum. And in truth, they should reference this network that I was speaking about: maker, wearer, community. I don't have all the answers, but we can always pop a label off the wall. And this is something we thought about throughout the reinstallation process, is like wall labels. We print ours. They're on paper, mounted on mat board. They're not expensive. So we can change them through conversation. We can be flexible. It doesn't have to be rigid and stay the same. One of the major changes during the reinstall was we shifted from using the term unknown artist to ancestor artist. The truth is, most of these works are ancestor artists, plural. Beadwork is intergenerational, and at a large scale, like making a beaded dress top, it's rarely the work of one hand. This deerskin dress is from the 1880s. It has a densely beaded yoke in sky blue. It offers a really good example of this. Sometimes I feel like everything I know has come from beadworkers. I've learned from beadworkers that knowledge lives in touch, in conversation, in shared observation. A few weeks ago, I had the privilege of studying this dress in the gallery with the Growing Thunder Collective. So a really wonderful multi-generational family of Nakota and Dakota artists who are renowned quill workers and beadworkers. We're planning an exhibition that's coming up in 2027 at the Joslin, and we took some time to walk through the galleries and look at the permanent collection, and it was really an honor. They are like such incredible dressmakers. And as artists, they immediately saw the planning and patience that went into making the dress. The beads are all from the same dye lot, meaning the maker had to know precisely the amount of beads to purchase all at once. And each lane stitch holds only 5 to 6 beads, so that's fewer than what you see with later dresses. So this adds a ton of time to make. And so it's probably multiple people who would work on this dress. Learning about beadwork is a collective activity. Even the mannequin for the dress taught us a few lessons during installation last summer. This is yours truly. When we first tried to mount the dress on the garment form, the dress was so heavy, it nearly toppled over. And, it's several pounds of essentially glass. Beadwork is heavy, so we had to completely change our approach. This was the first time we had created kind of a lifelike mannequin for this dress at the museum, and we had to think of a whole new approach to it. And you're basically creating a mannequin that has to mimic the qualities of the person who's wearing the dress. So we needed a confident, grounded stance with shoulders back, a strong core. You think about the weight of this. And so that's what the dress requires. It requires confidence. Someone represented their community when they wore this. So our challenge was to build a mannequin that could do it justice, and also please conservators. I think we landed on a good good solution. This dress is displayed beside a small buffalo robe embroidered with red quill work, what many call lifelines or the red road. The object file identified it as a girl's puberty robe, and indeed, such robes were used for coming of age ceremonies. During the Joslin's closure, we had the opportunity to work with a group called Sacred Sisters. They're part of a Native-run organization, Bluebird Cultural Initiative, that's based in Omaha. They're revitalizing these ceremonies for an intertribal community of young women from the city of Omaha and nearby reservations. So we met over the course of 2 summers, visited the camps, also visited in the classroom during the winters. They studied the robe, the beaded dress, and decided to represent themselves within the gallery. They lent us a set of their regalia from the ceremony today, um, which is just such an honor. Um, they are shown alongside a selection of beadwork that connects regalia making to different milestones in life. So boys' moccasins, men's moccasins, these both have buffalo hoof designs on them. A tapa, which is used in the throwing of the ball ceremony. Also beautiful examples of these in the Danforth collection. And it was really powerful. Once we got everything together in the gallery at once, we started to see connections across time, across beadwork. One example is the turtle. You see a turtle on a pictorial bag. Turtles are connected to the 13-moon lunar cycle, to strength, longevity. They're a woman symbol. You also see it. Some say that the design on the yoke of the dress, where it kind of dips, represents a turtle at the edge of a lake. It also echoes an earlier style of making dresses where the tail of the hide would sit on the chest. So stepping back a little bit, this really gave us larger perspective. We had to set aside familiar art historical schools when we were setting up the galleries, and one of the main sections or themes was art of the reservation era. So these dresses stand in conversation with landscapes, so Moran, Bierstadt, very recognizable to our museum visitors. And we really wrestled with how to put them in conversation. And, the reservation era came up because it really was, this is such a huge change to land and to how people relate to and occupy land that impacted Native artists, but also landscape painters. The establishment of reservations made it possible for national parks. Most of the Western landscape painters were painting national parks. Made it possible for settlement in these areas as well. So they are tied into that same moment. So, the creation of reservations reshaped artistic life across the continent, drawing together people from the Great Lakes to the woodlands and across the prairies. These newly imposed boundaries became sites of profound artistic exchange, so international, intertribal. The movement of artists, whether by choice or force, became the guiding theme of the section we call Reflections of Home. It traces the exchange of materials and ideas within North America and across the Atlantic Ocean. Drawn to the vibrancy of French Impressionism, painters like William Merritt Chase and Mary Cassatt traveled to Europe, adopting new stylistic approaches to American subjects, so sustaining ties to home even while abroad. Native artists also experimented with new ways to represent the natural world through enduring visual systems and newly introduced beadwork styles and techniques. So there is just a fluorescence of floral beadwork at the end of the 19th century. You can see on bandolier bags, moccasins, all kinds of adornment. And these vibrant compositions were more than decoration. They're repositories of traditional plant knowledge, of kinship ties, of personal stories. One of my favorite pairings in the American galleries brings together Mary Cassatt's Woman Reading and an Anishinaabe beaded yoke. The yoke exemplifies floral design in the north, so northern Minnesota area, and the ways that women indigenized global fashions. It has these great lace-like loops of edging along the collar that really pop against the red trim, the black velvet. And the beadworker may have been a lace maker. It was an art form that in the Western Great Lakes intertwined creativity with economic survival for women supporting their families. Um, the shared palettes of pinks and greens draws these two works into conversation. And seen together, I think they show how artists across cultures were using art to articulate belonging, resilience, and modernity in a rapidly changing world. Artists working across the prairies, which is a convergent terrain where the Great Lakes and the plains regions overlap, were also shaping their own aesthetic language around the natural world. This is an art of diaspora, rooted in the Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, and Oklahoma area, known as the prairie style. It occupies an in-between space in native art, perhaps overshadowed by the regional categories that border it. A fully beaded man's vest. This is just gorgeous. It's alive with abstract foliate designs in pink, grass green, pumpkin, navy, lots of red, white hearts. It exemplifies the design sensibility of the prairie style. These bright colors pulse against a white ground, and every inch is filled with chalk white beads. Bilateral symmetry is one of the core design principles of the prairie style. It's an art that mirrors the symmetry of the body itself. So symmetry is coming from the body in that aspect, that this is regalia meant to be worn, to move in, to be seen from every angle in motion. And it's really this embodiment of balance. Every community has a distinct approach to prairie florals, and within that, each design reflects the individuality of the maker. The winding, vining stems spiked with leaves on this man's breechcloth suggest for some the hand of a Ho-Chunk artist from the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska. Their ancestors were removed from Wisconsin after the U.S.-Dakota War. And since 1865, the Winnebago and Omaha reservations have shared a border. So this Ho-Chunk artist, would have maintained connections with relatives in Wisconsin. You also see this similar style in Wisconsin, reminding us that movement and exchange have always been central to this art story. That continual dialogue also shaped the work of Umaha artists. An Umaha breechcloth design offers a more intricate expression of symmetry. So each side mirrors the other in form, but inverts the colors. So pairing opposites that express balance through motion. And this two-needle applique beadwork technique allowed artists to create rounded, very beautifully flowing forms that seem to grow across this surface. And you'll see in late 19th century beadwork that beadworkers had access to more colors. The palette grew as beads came in not only from Venice, but also Paris and Bohemia. So that also shaped the kinds of artistic expression you see in regalia. This black and white photograph, it shows the Omaha man, Charlie Parker and Fisher Walker wearing their breechcloths, and it's just to show you that the white outlining of the beadwork really pops. You can even see it in a black and white photo. There's a bandolier bag nearby that sparked a lot of lively conversations with beadworkers. Has a loomed strap with geometric designs that are, some say are closer to like the northern region. An Omaha beadworker came in and was talking about the abstraction of the florals and how this is close to her community. And what she's learned is that abstraction is a form of humility. You don't want to represent something perfectly. That's not the goal. We also had a conversation about this, the pouch and the strap. One's older than the other. They were beaded at different times by different people. But if you look at, the Omaha and Winnebago reservations share a border, there's exchange and people are repurposing materials and sharing. This is another photo of the Hedawachi, so that's the annual powwow. And you can see that applique, so far we've seen examples of beadwork, but this is also seen in satin or silk applique on women's skirts and honor blankets. And this photograph is great because like every woman's honor blanket is different. When they're worn, the floral patterns fold symmetrically across the arms and cascade down the front. So these mirrored forms echo reflections on water, and indeed sometimes they represent medicines and plants that grow along the riverbank throughout this region. So again, we're reminded that design is more than decorative, it's relational. The blanket was collected on the Omaha Reservation more than a century ago. We don't know from whom. It's one of several with applique beadwork showing a striking consistency of hand. So I found similar examples in historic photos taken on the reservation, an example of a blanket in another collection. This is why, again, it's so important to have beadworkers come through the galleries and descendants of beadworkers. I think we're getting close to figuring out who this woman was who is making these blankets. We put the blue beaded blanket is on view as part of the reinstallation, and during that process, another really great curatorial assistant, Ingrid Cho, was interviewing applique artists. So here you see an Omaha elder, Pat Phillips, and she's showing that process of creating the designs, sort of like a snowflake, you fold paper. It was really cool. That wasn't our intention to do these interviews, but people started coming forward and were willing to share those stories. So we put them on a touch screen that's in the gallery. We also in the galleries, of course, want to show continuity. And Omaha elder Akta Keen, she's one of the last living Omaha language speakers, fluent speakers. She passed away earlier this year. So right before she passed, she lent her wearing blanket to the museum to show to visitors, and many have commented on how she was a teacher of this art form. So I want to be cognizant of time. So I'm going to give you just like a snapshot of some of the things that are coming up next at the museum. The whole reinstallation project, it was designed to plant seeds, to engage knowledge bearers, communities with the understanding that future work would grow from these relationships and from the installations. So on the anniversary of reopening, we had our first annual harvest in the gardens. We have all prairie plants in the gardens around the museum, and also medicines, cedar, sweetgrass, and sage. This garden was designed with Omaha advisors, and they're there for visitors. This brings me to our current project, which is called the Prairie as Pattern. And it's going to occupy a rotating gallery at the center of the whole American installation. So this space is always dedicated to Native art from the region, and it rotates annually. And it's opening at the conclusion of a Mellon-funded initiative to implement cultural care practices. So rehousing the collections, doing community-led conservation projects, and just opening storage, opening the museum doors to visitors who may not have been to the museum before. So this is going to be an intertribal installation that builds on some of the lessons, that we're learning in the reinstallation process. And it also brings us into the early 20th century. Among the works is this child's beaded vest. It has coyotes and chickens in this very lively standoff. It's whimsical, it's fitting for a child, and it's small. It's for like a 2-year-old. But it also reflects the changes in the early 20th century. It's attributed to an Umaha artist, and it integrates aspects of daily life into longstanding traditions. This is from a photo album put together by Frances LaFleshe's sister, Dr. Susan LaFleche. It's photographs of homes on the Omaha Reservation. And so this was post-allotment era. So families had individual plots. These were no longer communally held lands, and families farmed. Of course, we're in Omaha, Nebraska, which is Huskers land. So corn is very important to Nebraskans. But we also want to use corn as a subject for, again, a broader discussion that links the two worlds, that links what's happening in the early 20th century for Native people and for non-Native people. So today, less than 1% of tallgrass prairie remains, and that transformation is really due to corn, to commercial agriculture. Nebraska is a center of corn production. And so what comes with this is a new visual order, fences, rows of corn. And it's against this background. This is another work collected by Frances LaFleche. It's a headdress. So he collected this at the same time. You can see these red corn kernels that are sewn to the front of the headdress. So there's corn kernels being used as beads. So our plan is to draw on this long history, visual history of corn and cultural history of corn. This is from LaFleche's publication, and it's showing an Umaha teepee cover with cornstalk designs. This won't be in the show, but it's just to illustrate that corn has had a longstanding role within the community, especially within certain clans. So I'll end with this delicately beaded bag that we tried so hard to fit into the reinstallation and couldn't. So now is its time to shine. It's the bag takes the form of a corn cob enclosing a corn stalk. So it's this sort of self-contained universe of growth and renewal. And, this universal imagery of corn in Nebraska, stands for resilience, resonating with regional efforts towards food sovereignty and the recognition of corn as a unifying Indigenous presence across the Americas. This shared language and image grounds conversations about how we inhabit this place together and how we sustain it for the future. Thank you. So I believe we have a little time for Q&A.
Yes, if you just want to raise your hand and someone will come to you with a microphone if you have a question.
What is the context for these clothes in the sense of what's used daily, what's used for special occasions, and how much is just created for art? I don't know. I don't want to say to be sold, but so those three categories. How does all this line up?
It's a really good question. I think something like the beaded jacket is not for everyday use. At the same time, beadwork is so sturdy. If you like the beads are stitched entirely, or the sinew goes entirely through the hide. So that it stays. Women knew what they were doing. So, the dress, it's not an everyday dress. The jacket, not an everyday jacket. But the beadwork held up, and it could be repurposed. So you'll see like beaded strips that were cut off of jackets and used for replaced on a new shirt worn underneath. I think some of the smaller items, beaded bags like this, you saw on that the red contemporary dress. She had a tool belt with an awl case, a knife case. So I think a lot of these little bags, yeah, they were used every day. And you can tell that just by the wear that they have, but also how they've been mended over time.
Hi, I'm indigenous from Morocco, and my mother and my grandmother were weave workers. They weave carpets and rugs, and they would sell them to Frenchmen and people that came to our land. So it seems that across the world there is sort of a commonality of women being the artists and the aesthetic workers of cultures. But in the recent shifts of time, for example, in my town, there are a lot of men sewers, for example. They're the people that make our wedding gowns and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is there sort of a similar sort of like mix of men and women artists in Native American work? And like understand that the binary isn't obviously a binary, if that makes sense, regarding gender and stuff.
Yeah, totally. I know amazing dressmakers, beadworkers, quill workers who are men. And you're right, the binary, it doesn't work that way. Back in the day, you'd have two-spirit people who, I'm more familiar with Plains traditions, but who had ceremonial responsibilities. Yeah, so it's, in general, I feel like it's safe to assume that this is a work made by a woman, but like you said with your own community, it's totally different today. And I think that's important because that art form, that aesthetic expression is continuing. So whoever wants to pick that up and do that work, it's awesome. So thanks for sharing that.
My question is, how have you seen like the artistry and the beadwork tell stories or promote tribal sovereignty?
I think that is such a good question. I think on the question of sovereignty, the beadwork was sold. I mean, commissioned within somebody's community, also sold to collectors. I think for women makers, you look at pictorial beadwork, like Nellie Two Bear Gates. There are these artists who are just developing this incredible style in the 20th century, and it is so they can support their families. So there is that economic livelihood. I also see in the continuity of designs, there's a lot of knowledge embedded in those designs that's not made for us to know, not made for me as a non-native person to know, for our visitors. We might not be able to access it, but when you think of like the bandolier bags with florals, I've heard those talked about as maps. So if you think during the removal period, maintaining that connection to home is important, or they're explaining what certain medicines are and what they're used for. So, today I don't know what those are. That knowledge might be with the community. But I love that. I think it's important to just let that exist within cultural belongings, and it doesn't always need to be explained in an institutional context. But I also think just artists are storytellers. The fact that no two pair of moccasins are the same. Everything is made for somebody in particular. And it's telling, there are clan designs, there are family designs, there are honors from an individual that they're documenting. And that to me is a form of sovereignty, that storytelling. These cultural belongings are the history keepers. These are the storytellers. I would love to talk to you more about this, though I feel like I could go on for a while. So thank you for asking that question.
Hi, can you talk a little bit more about the beads themselves, like where they came from and how people, bead workers would acquire them?
Yeah. They'd acquire them through trading posts. Fur trade, early 19th century. That's when beads from Venice first came into the plains. Venice had like the whole bead industry on lockdown. Apparently, there's some really like great stories about French bead companies trying to step in and like Venetians being very upset about it. But eventually, later 19th century, bead production in France started in Bohemia, which is the Czech Republic, uh, and you have a more expansive style of making beads technique. You have faceted beads, so where they're like cut on the edges, or steel cut beads, so metal beads. So really, as the market kind of grew, and I do think that beadwork and plains artistry was like a major driver of the bead market. Um, Bead factories, makers ended up kind of expanding the products that they offered. Um, there are so many different ways to make beads, so I won't even get into that, but it's still fascinating.
All right, I think this is going to be our last question.
You. So my question is related to you mentioned earlier you were wanting to pair Euro-American artwork with indigenous artwork. And I guess as someone who is descended from other displaced people, I'm curious as to how it was received to do that pairing by indigenous people.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Everybody has a different response. We worked with a committee that's 10 mostly educators, community leaders, organizational leaders from tribes in the region who kind of came to this process and wanted that more like approach of simultaneity. But I think that's also specific to what a lot of their professions are as educators. And in Nebraska, we just don't have Native history. People just don't know. So I think it was really a strategy of like, how do you use what people know and are comfortable with and are familiar with, and then kind of build from there. But it was important that there is also a space just for Native art. And that's that gallery in the center that I was talking about towards the end, where the applique ribbon work is, and where this bag will be the corn beadwork. And I think that's been really effective too. I think it's important to kind of do both, because you have to have these moments of where, I don't know, where if somebody knows a painting better than they know like an extraordinary example of beadwork, that can still dominate the narrative. So we need those kind of standalone moments where we can just let cultural belongings speak. Okay. Thank you, everyone.